24 hours is an enormous amount of time in politics, isn't it? I had planned to do a monologue about the political setback in the state of Georgia last night. Just to recap, Georgia had two special Senate elections last night because they have a rule that you have to get 50% of the vote or more in a general election, or they go to a runoff between the top two. So there were two seats up for grabs. The Democrats won both of them with less than a percentage margin, giving control of the Senate to the Democrats. So now the House of Representatives, the presidency, and the Senate are in the hands of the Democrats, all three of them. That gives no checks and balances. And now the radicals, like the Squad, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, and the rest, can do the radical things they've been talking about, including making permanent, irrevocable changes like packing the court. A phrase meant adding so many more judges to the Supreme Court that you can instantly flip it hard left wing, or a massive immigration amnesty for illegals, for example, things that could never be come back from politically. That's what I was going to talk about. I was going to talk a little bit about the two terrible senators who were just elected, John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, but events overtook it. See, and that's why I'm sort of riffing from a notepad, because things have happened literally up to the minute. Today, there were massive protests in Washington, D.C. In fact, we sent our own Keean Bexley down there to cover the protests, stop the steal protests. And while there were, according to Keean, hundreds of thousands of peaceful protesters, there were a handful that went beyond mere protests. Now, let me give you a flavor for things. Here's a clip of Keean talking to some of the people he met on the street. Take a listen.
Do you think that Georgia was stolen in the same way as the presidency?
Absolutely.
What do you think happened? How could this have happened for a second time?
Because they're using the same voting machines. They're using the same voting machines, but they've been trapped. We got them.
I want to know what you hope Trump says today.
Oh, I think he's going to present devastating evidence of this massive election fraud. End of subject. It's over.
What do you think happened in Georgia last night?
Total fraud. They flipped all the votes in Dominion machines.
How could this have happened for a second time?
Who's watching?
I'm hoping that Trump says that he won and that we're not allowing this illegal steal of the election and this communist coup for this country.
How do you feel about Georgia? What happened?
I don't know, but I knew ahead of time that I haven't stayed up to date on those news, but I knew that they were going to cheat like they did before, and I can guarantee you that President Trump monitored them while they did it.
Great.
I guess the thing is it's not so much what Trump says as what happens.
Amen, brother.
We hope
exactly.
that the results of this election are fair and are accurate, and if they are fair and accurate, Trump will undoubtedly be the winner. We just have to count on our senators and our congressmen and women to stand up and do the right thing, which I'm not sure they will, but I'm hoping and praying they do.
As for the schedule,
those are strong political views, and you can agree with them or not, but every one of those views was peaceful. There were peaceful speeches and chants. People were upset by what they thought was an unfair and unfree election, and I have to agree. There were so many oddities, unfair and unfree, but according to the courts, it was still a legal election, in part because the courts had changed the way voting happened, using the pandemic as an excuse. Mail-in votes were allowed. I think that's what did it. That was the great outcome of the pandemic panic. But if you had hundreds of thousands of people around Capitol Hill, some number of them scaled Capitol Hill itself, and then a smaller number actually broke into the Capitol building itself. Here, take a look at that. Shocking footage. I have some questions because I'm a natural skeptic. It's been 20 years since 9/11. Billions of dollars have been spent hardening Capitol Hill, hardening the Pentagon, the White House. Billions have been spent. Is it really possible that a couple of dozen protesters, armed with maybe sticks and flags, could physically break their way into the Capitol building? I don't know. Maybe it was a trap. Maybe there were agents provocateurs. Maybe the capital of the deep state where the Democrat-dominated FBI and the Democrat-dominated Washington, D.C. Metro Police and the Democrat-dominated deep state are headquartered, maybe they sort of, I don't know, let the protesters in knowing what a PR disaster it would be. That's just speculation on my part. There were some incredible images. People standing right in the hall of the debate, people sitting in Nancy Pelosi's own chair. Is that really possible for an unarmed ragamuffin to achieve? And of course, these protests were known for days or weeks in advance. I'm scratching my head. There's other things that seemed odd to me. I've been watching conservative protests for years. I've never in my life seen conservatives smash a window or paint graffiti. I saw that today. I don't know, maybe that's the conspiratorial side of me. I have no proof of anything. I'm just asking questions because it seems odd to have violence on the right. But alas, there was violence in Trump's name. They certainly made a point of wearing red Trump hats and carrying Trump flags. I didn't like it. For years, I've railed against political violence. Violence, or the threat of violence for a political goal, we have a name for that. Terrorism. And even if we are sympathetic to Donald Trump, which we are, especially if we are sympathetic to Donald Trump, we have to rule out violence. That's one of the differences between being a supporter of the Republicans or a supporter of the Democrats. A lot of people were online saying that the left has taught the right this lesson. I mean, going back a decade, it was the Democrats that physically occupied and intimidated legislators in Wisconsin when they broke the back of the Democrat-supported unions back then. Over the years, we've seen people storm into Congress in the Justice Kavanaugh confirmation hearings. Steve Scalise, a high-ranking Republican, was actually shot at a baseball game. Senator Rand Paul was attacked and beaten so badly his ribs were broken. He almost died. And, of course, a summer of riots, which CNN called mostly peaceful. How can you forget those? Violence all year long, not condemned by the media, certainly not condemned by the Democrats. In fact, need I remind you that the Democrats posted the bail for anyone who was captured by police in this summer's riots. Donald Trump put up this tweet saying he was going to list Antifa as a terrorist group. Alas, he just didn't do it. Antifa is not a terrorist group, and in 2 weeks, Donald Trump will no longer be president. So what comes next? Well, the media will feast on this. Like I say, you can have hundreds of thousands of peaceful protesters, but the day will be colored by that handful of violent terrorists, I'll use the word, whether or not they're actually Donald Trump supporters or provocateurs on the left will not be known until this narrative is fully cemented. And the Democrats are tougher than Republicans. That's the one thing that made Trump different. He fought hard. He was a fighter by nature, and he fought till the very end. You know Democrats would have done the same. They did when Al Gore tried to win the election 20 years ago. Donald Trump is unusual in that he fights hard, unlike so many in the GOP establishment. So now that you have total control of the American system in the hands of the Democrats, now that you have the presidency, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, and the ability and the ambition to pack the courts, I fear for the worst. More than one Democrat strategist uses the phrase, never let a crisis go to waste. And I think they're going to do that. I think you're going to see a deep vengeance on the left. I think you're going to see an assault against conservative groups, conservative speech, conservative activism like you've never seen before, using the excuse of domestic terrorism. I think you'll see the media, who has never cared about political violence, suddenly become obsessed with it. I think you'll see censorship on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook go to new heights. Not just in a revenge to undo the Trump years, but to silence the right and to perpetuate the left. I think you're going to see a crackdown on freedom and in America on the First Amendment and Second Amendment like we have never seen before. All in all, a terrible day for America and a terrible day for conservatives. What do you think? That's